Welcome to the Dead Quiet Mysteries, where the silence holds secrets and every mystery has a story. I'm glad you're here. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from around the world. Get ready to explore the unexplained, the eerie, and the forgotten. Let's dive into the mystery together. Chapter 1. An Invitation to the Country. It was a dull grey morning in late October when Hercule Poirot, the renowned Belgian detective with the most fastidious moustaches in London, found himself studying a letter unlike most he received. The paper was thick, of fine ivory stock, and folded with the precision of an old-world hand. The seal, deep red wax imprinted with a crest, was unbroken until Poirot slid a slender paper knife beneath it and carefully peeled it away. The contents were penned in an elegant, looping script. My dear Monsieur Poirot, I am writing to you not with a crime to be solved, but with a deep, unsettling fear that one may soon occur. I pray you will not find this trivial. There are things happening at my home, Grange, that I do not understand. Strange noises in the night, objects misplaced, private things tampered with, whispers, half-heard, and always behind closed doors. Some may call it nerves. I call it intuition. Please come at once if you can. I place my full trust in your discretion and your unparalleled judgment. Yours in great anxiety, Lady Eugenia Montclair Poirot read the letter twice, then folded it with a faint frown. He tapped the envelope against his lips thoughtfully. An atmosphere of unease, he murmured aloud, mysterious disturbances. The good lady believes something sinister brews within her household. He paused. No, not a crime yet, but the whisper of one. He looked over at his friend and occasional companion, Captain Hastings's empty chair. Hastings was abroad, a fact Poirot regretted in moments such as these. Still he had his grey cells, and they were tingling. By the following morning, Poirot had boarded a train from Waterloo Station to the sleepy countryside of Surrey, dressed in his usual impeccable fashion. His grey suit was spotless, his spats gleamed, and his moustache had been waxed to symmetrical perfection. In his gloved hand, he carried a small valise containing only the essentials. He preferred to travel light but precisely. Grange, as the name suggested, was a grand estate, its three wings arranged around a central courtyard with ivy climbing across mellow stone. Built in the late Georgian style, the manor had once hosted lords and diplomats. Now it seemed more isolated, touched by the passage of years and a shadow of melancholy that Poirot could feel before he even stepped out of the hired motor car. He was met at the entrance by a tall, severe-looking butler who announced in clipped tones, Monsieur Hercule Poirot, I presume. Lady Eugenia awaits you in the drawing room. Inside, the house was tastefully decorated, though there was a heaviness to it. Tapestries dimmed by age, portraits whose eyes followed one down long corridors, and vases arranged with dried flowers rather than fresh. Poirot's shoes tapped smartly on the marble floor as he was led through the entrance hall. Lady Eugenia rose as he entered. Though in her mid-60s, she possessed a striking dignity, her posture still erect, her silver-blonde hair swept into an elegant chignon. She extended a gloved hand. Monsieur Poirot, thank you for coming on such short notice. The pleasure is mine, madam, he replied, bowing slightly. You are troubled. I could not ignore such a sincere request. She gestured to a chair and sat opposite him. I do not wish to sound melodramatic, but I have felt watched lately, listened to. There have been odd things, drawers disturbed though locked, faint footsteps when the house is still, and, this is the worst, notes left in strange places. One simply read, "It is not forgotten." Another was left in the library, written in Latin, "Veritas sub umbra late," truth lies hidden in shadow. Poirot's brow rose. A quotation, perhaps? And these notes? You have kept them? She opened a drawer beside her and produced a small envelope. Inside were 2 slips of paper, both anonymous, written in a rough hand. Poirot studied them. Do you suspect anyone in particular, madam? Lady Eugenia hesitated. My nephew Hugo dismisses it all as nonsense. He thinks I am imagining things. But I have known this house all my life. I know its moods. Something is stirring, and I fear it will end badly. And your family? Who resides here at Weatherly Grange? She listed the household members carefully. Her nephew, Hugo Montclair, the heir to the estate. Brilliant, forceful, but impatient. His younger sister Isabel, a gentle creature, artistic, and painfully shy. A long-time friend of the family, Dr. Felix Ramsden, had been staying with them for several weeks. And then there is Miss Clara Vale, she added, lowering her voice. A distant cousin. She came to stay 2 months ago after living on the continent. She has charm, certainly, but there is something unsettling about her. Poirot nodded slowly. And the staff? Only 3 remain. Mrs. Quince, the housekeeper, who has served faithfully since my marriage, a gardener, and a cook, both trustworthy. Yet someone has violated your privacy. That, madame, is a crime of intent, if not of law. Lady Eugenia nodded grimly. That is what I fear, that something old, something buried, is about to resurface. Poirot rose, buttoning his jacket. Then let us see, madame, whether Hercule Poirot cannot uncover the shadow at Weatherly Grange. She escorted him to his guest room, a chamber with a view over the eastern lawns and the distant tower. That was my husband's favourite place, she said quietly. Before the accident. Poirot turned. Accident, madame? She nodded. 10 years ago he fell from the tower. It was a windy night. He walked there often to clear his thoughts. They said he slipped on the wet stone. But... She hesitated, then smiled faintly. Forgive me. I'm tired. Poirot bowed again. We shall speak further tomorrow. For now, I shall begin to observe. And as she left him, closing the heavy oak door behind her, Poirot walked slowly to the window, his eyes narrowing as they fixed upon the looming stone tower at the edge of the trees. Somewhere in that house, he knew, the truth was already beginning to reveal itself. Chapter 2. The House and Its Inhabitants. The following morning dawned cold and clear, with mist curling around the lawns like ghostly fingers. Hercule Poirot rose early, his routine never faltering even in the unfamiliar setting of an English country house. After a precise shave and careful tending to his moustache, symmetry is the essence of order, he often said. He descended to the breakfast room, where sunlight filtered through diamond-paned windows and glinted on polished silverware. Lady Eugenia, already seated, gestured gracefully toward the chair beside her. You will meet the others shortly, Monsieur Poirot. I thought it best to allow them to greet you without too much warning. Très sage, Poirot said approvingly. One sees the truth more clearly when the masks are not yet arranged. They had only just begun on their kippers and toast when the door opened, and a tall man strode in. He had the look of someone accustomed to controlling a room, broad-shouldered, clean-shaven, with hair slightly dishevelled in a manner that suggested carelessness rather than style. Ah, he said in a clipped voice, you must be the detective. Hugo Montclair Poirot stood, offering a polite smile. Indeed, Hercule Poirot at your service. Hugo's handshake was brisk, almost dismissive. I'm afraid my aunt has dragged you out here over nothing. A creaking floorboard, a few misplaced items, hardly the work of a criminal mastermind. Lady Eugenia's expression tightened. I invited Monsieur Poirot because I trust my instincts. Yes, well, we'll all be reassured once he's had a good look around, won't we? Hugo sat and unfolded the paper. No harm in it, I suppose. Moments later, a second figure entered. A young woman of perhaps 23 with fair skin, delicate features, and the quiet demeanour of one who had spent more time observing than speaking. She wore a soft wool cardigan and carried a small leather-bound sketchbook. "This is my daughter Isabel," Lady Eugenia said, her tone gentler. Isabel offered a shy smile. "Good morning, Monsieur Poirot." "A pleasure, mademoiselle," Poirot said, his gaze lingering for a moment on the pencil smudges on her fingertips. The introductions were interrupted by the arrival of a brisk, affable man in his 40s. He wore a dark tweed suit and bore himself with the confidence of someone used to being welcomed into homes. "Dr. Felix Ramsden," he said, shaking Poirot's hand with vigour. "A great admirer of your work. Of course, we country doctors are more often called to a sprained ankle than a murder, thank heavens. No, but still, one keeps up with these things." Poirot smiled faintly. "It is good to be appreciated in all corners." "Ramsden's practically family," Lady Eugenia added. "He attended my late husband in his final days and has remained a close friend." The doctor nodded, his eyes scanning the room. "You'll find Weatherly Grange is a house of fine people, stiff upper lip and all that. But something's been amiss lately, I admit. I've noticed the atmosphere myself." "I always say," Hugo muttered, "if you go around expecting ghosts, you'll see them in every mirror." A short while later, they were joined by the final member of the household, a striking young woman with dark hair and an elegance that seemed effortless. Her eyes were intelligent, her smile subtle and cool. She extended her hand to Poirot. "Clara Vale, a pleasure." "Enchanté," Poirot replied. "Lady Eugenia tells me you are a cousin." "Distant," Clara replied with a soft laugh. "But the Montclairs have been kind to me. I've been living abroad the past few years, Paris mainly, returned only recently, trying to settle somewhere quieter." Poirot noted how Hugo's expression shifted ever so slightly at her words. Not distaste exactly, wariness perhaps. There was a tension between them concealed beneath courtesy. Breakfast concluded with murmured politeness and a vague promise of a tour of the grounds. Poirot asked to be shown the house in more detail and was handed over to Mrs. Quince, the formidable housekeeper. She was a woman of 60 with upright posture, a face lined from decades of care, and an expression that brooked no nonsense. "I've looked after this house since Lady Eugenia's wedding day," she informed Poirot proudly. "I know every corridor, every creaking board, and every hiding place from cellar to attic. If something strange is going on, it hasn't been me to start it." "A loyal servant, madame," Poirot said warmly, "a rare and noble creature." She sniffed, clearly pleased despite herself. "You'll want to see the library, I expect. That's where one of those notes turned up." The library was a handsome room, wood-panelled, lined with shelves of well-kept books, and filled with the scent of old paper and polished mahogany. Poirot let his eyes sweep the space. "Anyone spend time here often?" "Miss Isabel sketches here sometimes." "His lordship used to, before the accident, that is. These days it's mostly Lady Eugenia. She's quite fond of her reading." Poirot moved to the fireplace. Above it hung a large portrait of Lord Henry Montclair, Eugenia's late husband. He was depicted as a stern man with keen eyes and a military bearing. There was something oddly watchful in the way he seemed to look down from the frame. "You were here when he died?" Poirot asked gently. Mrs. Quince's expression didn't change. "Aye, it was a stormy night and he liked to walk the tower when he couldn't sleep. The rain made the stones slick. He slipped, fell over the balustrade. Was there an inquiry? Of course. Ruled an accident. Though between you and me, I always thought it odd. In what way, madam? It wasn't just the fall, she said after a pause. He'd been troubled toward the end, kept things to himself, looked over his shoulder like someone was following him, and the day before he died, he called for the family solicitor, but the man never arrived. Poirot filed this away. Was anything ever found? A letter? A new will? Not to my knowledge. Later, walking the halls alone, Poirot paused outside the library once more. A painting on the wall, an old landscape, hung ever so slightly askew. He adjusted it gently, noting the faint mark left behind where it had been tampered with. An intentional disturbance, or the careless act of a cleaner? Either way, it was a detail, and Poirot was not one to ignore details. As he returned to his room, he passed Clara Vale in the corridor, deep in thought, her brow furrowed. "A beautiful house," she said softly. "But so many secrets, don't you think?" Poirot turned, his voice calm. "Every house has its ghosts, mademoiselle, but some prefer to remain unseen." And with that, he left her there, the shadows stretching long through the windows, the hush of Weatherly Grange growing heavier by the hour. Chapter 3. Whispers and Shadows. That afternoon, the skies darkened as a wind swept in from the moors, whispering through the trees and rattling the windows of Weatherly Grange. Poirot, ever composed, took advantage of the inclement weather to begin his quiet investigation indoors, starting not with questions, but with observation. He moved from room to room like a man cataloguing a museum, his eyes absorbing details others would have dismissed: a scrape on the skirting board beside the staircase, a brass doorknob recently polished, while others had dulled with age, a faint, muddy footprint, too small for Hugo, too large for Isabel, on the stone floor near the servants' stairs. He paused at the base of the eastern tower. The old staircase spiraled up in tight, narrowing turns, its iron railing cold to the touch. Each step creaked slightly underfoot. As he ascended, the temperature dropped, and the air smelled faintly of damp stone. At the top was a small circular chamber, open to the elements through narrow slits in the stone wall. The floor where Lord Montclair had fallen had been repaired, but the stone still bore a faint, weathered stain. Poirot stood there for a moment, letting the silence speak. He imagined the late Lord Henry pacing, muttering to himself, leaning too far over the balustrade. Or perhaps being pushed. But motive, always motive, he reminded himself. Accidents may conceal foul play, but only if someone profits from the tragedy. That evening, Poirot requested a family gathering after dinner in the drawing room. It was a room made for winter nights, dark oak panels, a deep red rug, and the crackling fire lending flickering warmth. "I hope this isn't to be a formal interrogation," Hugo said as he poured himself a brandy. "Not at all, monsieur," Poirot replied smoothly. "I simply wish to understand the household better, and perhaps the history." "History?" Clara raised an eyebrow. "That's a broad term." "Indeed. I find that when the present begins to crack, it is usually the past that presses beneath." Lady Eugenia, seated beside the fire, gave a slow nod. "You speak the truth, Monsieur Poirot. This house has endured generations of secrets, but some are best left untouched." "Perhaps," Poirot said, folding his hands. "But secrets, madame, have a habit of leaking, one whisper at a time." Isabel sat quietly, sketchbook in her lap, occasionally glancing up, but not speaking. Poirot turned to Hugo. "You inherited Weatherly Grange after your uncle's death." Hugo gave a wry smile. "Eventually?" There was some delay, of course, legal wrangling. But yes, the estate passed to me. My father died young, so I was next in line. And you have no siblings? Only Isabel. And Miss Vale, Poirot said, glancing at Clara, returned only recently? Yes, Clara replied smoothly. I was in France when Lord Henry passed away. I came to England this summer, a fresh start, or so I thought. You've been made uncomfortable here? Poirot asked, his voice mild. Clara hesitated, then shrugged. I wouldn't say uncomfortable, but there is a tension in the house, as though someone is holding their breath. There are often tensions in old houses, Dr. Ramsden said. They absorb emotion, grief, guilt, memory. It lingers. Poirot leaned forward. And you, Doctor, have you noticed anything particular? These notes, for example. Ramsden frowned. Lady Eugenia showed me one. I assumed it was a prank, possibly from a servant, someone with too much imagination. Indeed. Poirot's eyes flicked toward the doorway, where a faint creak could be heard. A shadow passed beyond the frosted glass. Poirot said nothing, but the glint in his eyes sharpened. Later that night, Poirot walked alone along the upper landing, the candle in his hand flickering as the wind pushed against the house. He paused near the west wing, which had been closed off. Lady Eugenia claimed it was too large for everyday use. But Poirot, ever curious, tested the door. It was locked. He returned to his chamber, noting as he did that the scent of lavender, too strong, almost artificial, lingered near Clara Vale's door. Not unusual for a lady's room, yet beneath it, something acrid, a faint whiff of burnt paper, perhaps? In the morning, the house was abuzz. Another note, Lady Eugenia said quietly, handing it to Poirot over breakfast. It was slipped under my door during the night. The handwriting was the same, rough and deliberately uneven. The sins of the father return. The truth lies within the wing of silence. Poirot read it aloud. Hugo cursed softly. This is childish nonsense. Someone is trying to frighten her. Or distract, Poirot murmured. Or warn. Isabel's face had gone pale. She stared down at her plate, lips pressed tightly. Poirot rose. I shall now examine the west wing. But it's locked, said Lady Eugenia. Has been for years. Nevertheless, Poirot replied with quiet finality, it is time for it to be opened. Mrs. Quince, who had entered carrying a tray, stiffened slightly. Poirot did not miss it. With permission granted, the butler fetched the large iron key from the study. The group watched silently as Poirot unlocked the heavy door. It swung open with a groan, revealing a long corridor shrouded in dust. Poirot stepped in first. Dust coated the wooden floor, but he immediately noted a set of faint, recent footprints. Someone had been here recently. He moved from room to room, an unused guest suite, a nursery, a faded study, and then paused outside one final door at the far end. The handle bore soot, fresh and black. Poirot opened it gently. Inside, the fireplace was cold but used, ashes in the grate. He approached and bent down. Buried in the cinders were scraps of burned paper. Carefully, he retrieved what he could. Part of a letter, partially legible. Cannot let her find out. The will. Revised. Everything changes if. Poirot rose slowly. Behind him, Lady Eugenia gasped softly. Clara, who had followed, said nothing, but watched with narrowed eyes. A secret chamber within a forgotten wing, Poirot said aloud. A message in fire, and someone who fears the truth. Outside, the storm had begun again. The trees rattled, and the Grange seemed to groan beneath the weight of its silence. Poirot turned to the others. The past has stirred, mes amis, and now it begins to reveal itself. Chapter 4. The Man in the Garden. The storm passed by morning, leaving Weatherly Grange glistening in the early light. Dew clung to the hedgerows and mist coiled in the lower fields. The estate looked peaceful again. Too peaceful, Poirot thought, like a painting deliberately posed to conceal a blemish. Poirot chose this calm to take a solitary walk through the gardens. His shoes crunched along the gravel as he passed through sculpted topiary and beneath rose arches now fading in the autumn chill. The air was crisp, the scent of damp earth mingling with the faint perfume of dying blooms. He passed the old greenhouse, shuttered and unused. Nearby, a rusted gate led to the orchard, a neglected plot, overgrown and tangled, where the Montclair children had once played. It was there, at the edge of the path, that Poirot spotted something curious. A footprint in the soft earth. Not his, nor Hugo's, too small. Likely a woman's. He crouched, examining it, then noticed the imprint of a heel, a distinct cut in the shape. The same mark he had seen near the servants' stairs. And nearby, on a low stone bench, a cigarette stub, foreign, thin, with a gold-tipped filter. Not a brand sold in England. He picked it up with his handkerchief and tucked it into his coat. A movement caught his eye. Beyond the orchard wall, a man was standing, tall, coat collar turned up, face in shadow. He watched Poirot for a moment, then turned and walked quickly toward the woods. Poirot, frowning, followed, but by the time he reached the gate, the man had vanished. Returning to the house, Poirot found Dr. Ramsden in the front parlour, nursing a cup of coffee. "You're out early," the doctor remarked. "Not lost in the hedgerows, I hope?" "I was enjoying the peace," Poirot said mildly, "though one does not expect to find strangers wandering beyond the orchard." Ramsden's brows rose. "Stranger?" Poirot nodded. "Tall man, dark coat, gone before I could greet him." "None of the grounds staff fit that description," the doctor mused. "The gardener's away in town today, and the handyman's built like a barrel, not tall." "And no one is expected?" "Not to my knowledge." Poirot studied the doctor's face for a moment. Calm, honest. Yet behind the polite civility, there was a flicker of apprehension. Poirot noted it carefully. Later, in the library, Poirot questioned Isabel. She sat by the window, sketching the edge of the landscape beyond the estate walls. Her hands moved delicately, but her expression remained guarded. "Your drawings are very fine, mademoiselle," Poirot said. "You see much?" "More than people realize," she replied, still sketching. "Then perhaps you have seen something recently? Something odd?" Isabel looked up. "There's been someone watching the house at night. From the trees near the orchard. I thought I imagined it at first. But 2 nights ago I saw him clearly from my window, a man in a dark coat, standing very still. You told no one? I wasn't sure they'd believe me." Poirot leaned forward. "You did well to observe. Now tell me, mademoiselle, what do you believe is happening here?" Isabel hesitated, lowering her sketchbook. "Everyone says my father's death was an accident. But he wasn't the sort of man to slip and fall. He was precise, careful. The night he died, I heard voices in the tower, raised voices, a man and a woman." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Did you recognize them?" She shook her head. "I was frightened. I stayed in my room." "Your drawings are very fine, mademoiselle," Poirot said. "You see much." "More than people realize," she replied, still sketching. "Then perhaps you have seen something recently? Something odd?" Isabel looked up. "There's been someone watching the house at night, from the trees near the orchard. I thought I imagined it at first. But 2 nights ago, I saw him clearly from my window, A man in a dark coat, standing very still. You told no one? I wasn't sure they'd believe me. Poirot leaned forward. You did well to observe. Now tell me, mademoiselle, what do you believe is happening here? Isabel hesitated, lowering her sketchbook. Everyone says my father's death was an accident, but he wasn't the sort of man to slip and fall. He was precise, careful. The night he died, I heard voices in the tower, raised voices, a man and a woman. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Did you recognize them? She shook her head. I was frightened. I stayed in my room. Poirot nodded slowly. And since then, these notes? Have you received any? No, she said. But I found something odd in my father's study a week ago, tucked inside a book on estate law. She reached into her bag and handed him a folded sheet of paper. It was brittle, aged, torn from a letter. Must be done before the end of the month. I cannot delay. If the will is changed, she will no longer inherit anything, and we must act. There was no signature. Poirot read it twice, lips pursed. May I keep this? Isabel nodded. The rest of the day passed slowly. Poirot moved about the house, quietly questioning servants, revisiting the tower, and listening, always listening. Each detail, no matter how small, settled into his mind like a piece of a vast and deliberate puzzle. By late afternoon, Lady Eugenia called Poirot to the morning room. She stood by the window, clutching a letter in her hand, her expression pale. This arrived, she said, passing it to him. It was a threat. Stop digging, or more than the past will be buried. You've been warned. Poirot read it twice, his expression unreadable. Delivered how? Left on my writing desk. I left the room only briefly. Someone within the house, Poirot said. Not a stranger, someone with keys, with access, someone who fears the past being uncovered. Lady Eugenia sat down, visibly shaken. I cannot bear another loss. First Henry, then the slow disintegration of this house. I thought time would heal, but the walls whisper louder each year. Poirot gently placed the letter on the table. Do not fear, madame. The truth, when brought into the light, loses its power to harm. That evening, Poirot retired early, but he did not sleep. At precisely 1 o'clock, he rose, dressed silently, and crept through the halls with the slippered silence of a cat. He made his way once more to the west wing, pausing outside the locked nursery. It was dark, empty. Then he heard it, a soft creak. Poirot turned, moving quickly to the far end of the corridor. A door stood ajar. He stepped inside. It was an old bedroom, clearly unused. Dust motes floated in the moonlight streaming through the window. Then he saw it. On the desk, a ledger, newly handled. He flipped it open. Inside were pages of handwritten notes, financial ledgers, dates, evidence of estate dealings that didn't match what Hugo had described earlier. Money siphoned, land sold quietly, a pattern of manipulation. Poirot's eyes glinted. As he turned to leave, he stopped. In the dust on the floor, fresh shoe prints. Someone had been here tonight. He bent to examine them, the same narrow heel, the same strange indent. Then, from somewhere below, a scream echoed through the house. Poirot ran, heart steady, mind racing, down the stairs across the main hall. The scream had come from Clara Vale's room, and as he pushed open the door, the others rushing behind him, they found her standing by the bed, hands trembling, her eyes locked on the note pinned to her mirror. It read, "Too late. He knows." Poirot turned slowly, surveying the shocked faces behind him. "Indeed," he murmured. "He does." Chapter 5. Unmasked intentions, the scream, the hurried footsteps, and the whispered confusion hung in the corridors of Weatherly Grange like the lingering fog on the moors. Clara Vale stood by her vanity table, pale and visibly shaken, the anonymous note trembling in her hand. Poirot took the paper from her with utmost care. It was short, like the others, written in the same angular scrawl. Too late, he knows. Behind him, Lady Eugenia had arrived, wrapped in a velvet shawl despite the warmth of the room. Isabel appeared next, blinking in confusion, followed by Hugo, whose irritation at the disturbance poorly masked something else. Concern or guilt. Locked doors, Hugo muttered. We ought to have locked all the doors and kept this lunacy out. Poirot turned slowly. But the lunacy, as you call it, is already within the house, Monsieur Montclair. He looked back to Clara, whose hands had finally stilled. Did you see or hear anyone? No, she whispered. I was asleep until I felt, I don't know, something. Like someone had been watching me. Then I saw the note on the mirror. There are no signs of forced entry, Poirot murmured, eyes scanning the room. He moved to the window, still latched from the inside. Did anyone pass this way in the night? He asked the group. Lady Eugenia shook her head. No one. My room is across the hall. I heard nothing. Poirot turned back to Clara. Mademoiselle, this note, what does it mean to you? She hesitated. It could mean anything, but the he, you think it refers to you? I suspect it does, Poirot said. But the more intriguing question is, what is it that I know? There was silence. Poirot looked from face to face, searching not for answers, but for hesitation, for the flicker of fear in someone trying not to give themselves away. When the others had retired once more, Poirot remained. Clara sat on the bed, staring at her hands. He spoke softly. You knew Lord Montclair well before his death, n'est-ce pas? Her eyes narrowed slightly. He was my benefactor. Poirot arched a brow. An arrangement of generosity, or something more personal? Clara looked away. He was kind to me, that's all I'll say. But perhaps he intended to do more. You see, I found burned fragments of a letter in the West Wing fireplace. Someone feared what he might reveal, or what he might change. You think he was going to alter his will? She asked, almost too quickly. Poirot tilted his head. You ask it as though you hadn't already considered it. Her lips parted to reply, but then she turned away. Poirot did not press further. He had learned long ago that silence can be as revealing as speech. The next morning, the house seemed to exist under a veil of tension. Even the staff, usually invisible, moved stiffly about their duties, eyes averted, words hushed. Poirot, however, remained as composed as ever. He requested that all members of the household gather in the conservatory after breakfast. The room, usually a haven of light and calm, was now an arena of quiet suspicion. Let us speak plainly, he began, folding his hands. There have been notes, threats, secrets, lies. Someone within this house is responsible. Hugo scoffed. You can't seriously believe... I believe, Poirot said, cutting him off gently, that your uncle's death was no accident. I believe it was the first in a sequence of actions intended to conceal a truth, perhaps about the inheritance, or something older still. Isabel's eyes flicked to Lady Eugenia. Clara looked away. Poirot continued, and now someone fears that truth is about to be exposed. Last night's note confirms it. Ramsden frowned. But surely the question is, why now? Lord Montclair has been dead for nearly a year. Oui, Poirot agreed, and only now has Miss Vale returned. Only now is the will fully executed. Only now are documents surfacing that suggest a change was imminent. That suggests motive, timing, fear. He stepped closer to the center of the room. The person responsible is no common villain. This is not a crime of passion. It is cold, calculated and hidden behind the respectability of this house. Lady Eugenia's voice cut through the tension. "Then what do you intend to do, Monsieur Poirot?" Poirot looked at her for a long moment. "I intend to bring the truth into the open, and I believe we are very near to it." That afternoon, Poirot retreated to the library and requested access to the estate's legal records. Lady Eugenia, though reluctant, sent for the family solicitor in town to deliver the documents. Among the ledgers and wills, Poirot found several discrepancies, names struck through, dates altered, an addendum unsigned but unmistakably written in Lord Henry Montclair's hand, proposing a revised bequest, one that removed Hugo as primary heir and granted the bulk of the estate to someone simply initialed C.V. Clara Vale. The pieces slid closer together. Poirot replaced the documents and returned to the sitting room, where he found Isabel alone. She looked up from her embroidery. "Did you find what you were looking for?" "Almost. One final piece remains. May I ask, have you ever heard of a man named Laurent Girard?" Her needle paused in the cloth. "No," she said slowly. "Why?" "I believe he may be the man seen in the orchard. Foreign cigarette, French in brand. He is known to have connections in Paris." Clara's voice came from the doorway behind him. "That name, I know it." Poirot turned. Clara stepped inside, her voice trembling. "Laurent Girard was a man my mother once knew, before she married. I found a letter in an old trunk. I don't know why I kept it." It was addressed to Lady Eugenia. Poirot's eyes lit. "May I see it?" Clara nodded and left the room. A few minutes later, she returned with a faded envelope. Poirot opened it carefully. The letter was brief but explosive. "If you don't tell him the truth, Eugenia, I will. She has a right to know who her real father is. I will not stay silent any longer." Poirot read it twice. Then he folded it neatly. The storm, he realized, had begun not a year ago, but decades earlier, and its final reckoning was at hand. Chapter 6. The Portrait and the Lie. The sun slipped behind a curtain of clouds as Poirot returned to the drawing room, the letter from Laurent Girard still in his pocket. It was not merely a letter, it was a key to a long-concealed truth. He stood for a moment before the fireplace, studying the large oil painting above it. Lord Henry Montclair seated on a garden bench, the family estate fanned out behind him. At first glance, it was a portrait of success, but Poirot, ever attentive to detail, saw what others did not. The expression was not pride, it was regret. Hugo entered just then, carrying a crystal decanter. "You've made this house jumpy, Poirot. Is that your method? Stir the pot until the guilty rise to the top?" Poirot turned with a slight smile. "Sometimes, monsieur, the surface must be disturbed before the truth beneath can be seen clearly." Hugo poured a generous splash of brandy. "I suppose you think I'm the villain in this melodrama?" "I think," said Poirot, "that you are a man who has much to lose." "Isn't everyone?" "Not everyone," Poirot said gently. "Some have already lost." Hugo drained his glass. "You know nothing about my uncle. He kept secrets, compartmentalized everything. I suspect even his will was a final insult." Poirot nodded thoughtfully. "You have seen the revised draft, then?" Hugo stiffened. "What draft?" "The one found among the estate records, unsigned but genuine. It left Weatherly Grange to Miss Clara Vale." For a moment, Hugo said nothing. Then his voice dropped, low and bitter. "She didn't deserve it. She's no Montclair." "That," said Poirot softly, "depends on whom you ask." In the afternoon, Poirot requested Lady Eugenia's company in the morning room. She sat composed, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "You recognize the name Laurent Girard?" he began. Her eyelids fluttered. "Yes, it's an old story." "I would very much like to hear it," he said. She exhaled, her tone clipped. "Laurent was, a companion from my youth, before I met Henry. Brief, foolish, and not something I ever intended to revisit. But he wrote to you." "Yes, threatening to tell Henry about Isabel, about her parentage." Poirot tilted his head. "So it is true. Isabel is not Henry's daughter." Lady Eugenia flinched. "She is my daughter. That's what matters." "And yet," Poirot said gently, "in a house like Weatherly Grange, legitimacy is everything. Did Henry know?" Number the Y never told him. He adored her. If he had known, it would have ruined everything. So I buried it. Poirot was silent for a moment. "Madame, secrets have a way of emerging, and when they do, they are seldom kind, especially when mixed with inheritance, resentment, and family pride." Her composure slipped just for an instant. "What are you suggesting, Monsieur Poirot?" "That someone may have discovered your secret and used it as leverage, or worse, to silence the past for good." Later that day, Poirot returned to the tower. The steps were steep, the air colder at the top. He paused in the study chamber where Lord Montclair had spent his final hours. The desk remained untouched, books still lined the shelves. Poirot moved deliberately, eyes tracing along the spines until he found it, a thin volume on Norman land transfers. He removed it and opened to the middle, where a page had been torn cleanly out. It was the same book Isabel had mentioned earlier, the one in which she had found the letter about the will. Poirot examined the gap, deliberate, hidden, as if the page had contained something damning. He walked slowly to the writing desk and examined the ink blotter. Faint impressions remained, a single word legible when angled in the light: "Forgive." Poirot's brow furrowed. A man facing death might leave many thoughts behind, but forgiveness implied guilt, or a reckoning. And what had he to forgive? As evening fell, Poirot returned to the parlour. He found Isabel sitting by the window, the last light tracing golden patterns across the floor. She looked up, sensing his presence. "You're about to uncover something, aren't you?" she asked quietly. "I already have," he said. "Now I'm only arranging the pieces." He paused. "Did you ever suspect you were not Lord Montclair's daughter?" She flinched. "Once, when I was a child. I asked my mother why I didn't resemble him. She told me I took after her side. I never asked again." Poirot nodded gently. "The truth can wound, but sometimes it also frees." She met his eyes. "Do you think that truth is why he died?" "I think," said Poirot, "that someone believed a truth might change everything, and so they acted to preserve their place in the order of things." That night, Poirot convened a private meeting with Dr. Ramsden in the study. "You've been quiet throughout," Poirot observed. "But you know these people well, perhaps too well." Ramsden leaned forward. "You're not wrong, Poirot. I've treated the Montclairs for 15 years. I saw more than they thought. Secrets gnawed at this house long before Lord Henry's fall. Such as? Isabel's true paternity. I suspected it. And Clara, there were whispers. The staff believed she was more than a companion, that Henry intended to make her his heir. And you?" Poirot asked. "Did you believe it?" "I did." Poirot stood. "And yet you said nothing." "I'm a doctor," Ramsden said, "not a gossip." Poirot gave a small smile. "But even a doctor must sometimes act. Tell me, where were you the night Lord Montclair died?" Ramsden blinked. "In my room." "Reading alone?" "Yes." Poirot's expression did not change, but the air grew heavier. "I believe," he said slowly, "that you have not told me everything." The doctor stood. "You can believe what you like." Poirot let him go. The man had not cracked, but there was something beneath his calm, a tremor, the kind that emerges only when guilt presses too long against the soul. Midnight came quietly. The house slept, at least most of it. Poirot stood in the nursery once more. This time he was not alone. He had asked Lady Eugenia, Hugo, Clara, Isabel, and Dr. Ramsden to gather there, despite the hour. Confusion lined their faces, but Poirot was calm. "You wonder why I brought you here," he said. "The answer, mes amis, lies not in what this room contains, but what it once did." He gestured to the faded wallpaper. This was Isabel's nursery, but it also held something else, a truth that Lord Montclair discovered in his final weeks. Poirot pulled from his coat the copy of the unsigned will. He was planning to change everything, and someone knew it. Gasps murmured around the room. Poirot continued. "The notes, the man in the orchard, the letters. It all points to a single intention, silence, to keep the past buried." He paused. "But it is no longer buried. Tomorrow I shall reveal all, the identity of the murderer, the motives, the methods, and the mistake." He stepped forward. "Because always there is a mistake." And with that, he turned and left the room, leaving the suspects to their fear, their thoughts, and their secrets. The endgame had begun. Chapter 7. Shadows in the drawing room. The following morning dawned bleak and grey, the kind of day when the sky seemed to press down on the earth as if to stifle secrets before they could breathe. Weatherly Grange was quiet. Even the usual chatter of the household staff felt muted, as though they too sensed the storm approaching. Poirot awoke early, his mind already at work. Over a simple breakfast of tea and toast, he reviewed the facts, the anonymous notes, the torn page from the book, the mysterious Laurent Girard, the disputed will, and the tangled relationships that seemed to bind everyone in a web of half-truths and silent resentments. He dressed with his usual precision, starched collar, perfectly knotted cravat, polished shoes, and descended to the drawing room where Lady Eugenia was already waiting. She greeted him with a measured nod, her expression guarded. "I trust you have found some clarity, Monsieur Poirot?" she asked, pouring herself a cup of tea. "Clarity, madame, like the morning mist. It is never fully clear until the sun burns it away, but we approach that sun. Let us speak frankly." She nodded. "Very well." Poirot seated himself opposite her and began. "The key to this mystery lies not only in what has been said, but in what has been left unsaid. I believe there are at least two secrets here, one of birth and one of death." Lady Eugenia's eyes flickered with unease. "You mean Isabel and the late Lord Montclair?" "Precisely. Isabel is not Lord Henry's daughter by blood, as we have discussed, and yet she holds a claim, emotional, if not legal, on this estate." Lady Eugenia's hand trembled slightly. "She is family in every way that matters." "And Clara Vale," Poirot continued, "has a stronger legal claim, but you, madame, stand to lose much, a fact not lost on certain parties." Lady Eugenia drew herself up. "I do not understand what you imply." Poirot smiled faintly. "Patience. We are near the crux." Later that morning, Poirot gathered the household in the drawing room. The room was heavy with unspoken accusations and nerves. Hugo paced near the fireplace. Clara sat with her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Isabel looked resolute but wary, and Dr. Ramsden stood quietly by the window. Poirot began. "Yesterday I spoke of mistakes. Today I will speak of motives." He paced slowly. Lord Henry Montclair was a man burdened by secrets. He planned to change his will to provide for Clara Vale. This was known to some, perhaps to all of you. Murmurs rippled through the room. Poirot's eyes rested on Hugo. "Monsieur Montclair, you have expressed strong disdain for Miss Vale's presence here." Hugo flushed. "She has no claim, she is a nobody." "And yet you worried about your inheritance," Poirot said softly. Hugo's jaw tightened. "Who wouldn't?" Poirot's gaze shifted to Lady Eugenia. "And you, madame, did you seek to protect your family's name, to prevent a scandal from emerging?" Lady Eugenia's voice was steady but firm. "A mother protects her children." "Indeed, but sometimes protection can become suffocation." Poirot then turned to Isabel. "You, mademoiselle, have lived in the shadow of uncertainty. Do you desire to claim what you believe is yours?" Isabel's eyes flashed. "I want the truth." "Ah, but the truth is dangerous," Poirot said. He faced Doctor Ramsden last. "And you, Doctor, you hold knowledge that goes beyond medicine, secrets kept in silence." Ramsden's face was unreadable. Poirot continued, "The night Lord Henry died, someone entered his chambers. A struggle occurred, and yet no one here has admitted to hearing anything." He pulled from his pocket the fragments of the letter found burned in the fireplace. This letter threatened exposure. Someone feared this so much they resorted to murder. Poirot paused, letting the weight of his words settle. Then a sudden sharp noise broke the silence, the unmistakable crash of a glass falling. All eyes turned to Hugo, who had knocked over a decanter in his agitation. "You play a dangerous game, Poirot," he spat. "This house is no stranger to lies, but you forget there are consequences to digging too deep." Poirot raised a hand. "Consequences are the currency of truth." The afternoon passed with tense conversations and guarded glances. Poirot retreated briefly to the library, where he cross-referenced names and dates, reconstructing a timeline. He discovered something new, a series of letters from Laurent Girard, addressed not only to Lady Eugenia, but also, surprisingly, to Lord Henry Montclair himself. The correspondence spoke of debts, secrets, and a meeting planned on the night of Lord Henry's death. Poirot shared this with the household that evening. Laurent Girard was to meet Lord Henry the night he died, Poirot said. This meeting was to settle old scores, perhaps reveal truths too dangerous to be spoken aloud. Isabel gasped. "Laurent was threatening my mother?" "No, mademoiselle, he was threatening more than that. Perhaps your family's legacy." Poirot then revealed a final chilling fact. Last night's note, too late, he knows, was not meant for me. There was a startled silence. It was meant for someone inside this house who feared their secret was about to be revealed. Poirot's eyes scanned the room until they rested on Lady Eugenia. "You feared Laurent Girard's revelations would destroy your carefully built world." Lady Eugenia nodded slowly. "He was a reminder of mistakes best left buried." "And yet," Poirot said softly, "it was not Laurent who killed Lord Henry." A murmur rose. "Then who?" Poirot smiled, but it was a smile without warmth. "The murderer was one of you." He paused, letting the suspense stretch. "Someone who knew of the planned will change, who saw their inheritance slipping away. Someone who believed killing Lord Henry would keep the past silent and the fortune safe." A sudden silence followed. "Tomorrow," Poirot announced, "I will reveal the truth in full. The name, the motive, the means. Until then, I ask that no one leave the estate." As the group dispersed, Hugo's glare lingered longest on Poirot. "Try not to be wrong, detective," he muttered. Poirot watched him go, his little grey cells buzzing. The final act was near, and soon every secret would be laid bare. Chapter 8. The little grey cells prevail. The morning air was crisp, the sky a pale silver as the household gathered once more, in the drawing room of Weatherly Grange. The tension was palpable, faces drawn, eyes wary, as though each soul braced for the revelation that would shatter carefully constructed facades. Poirot stood by the window, hands folded neatly behind his back. His sharp eyes scanned the assembled group. Lady Eugenia, pale but composed, Hugo, restless and defiant, Clara Vale, her composure fragile, Isabel, steady with quiet dignity, and Dr. Ramsden, who met Poirot's gaze evenly. "Mes amis," Poirot began, his voice calm but commanding, "we have traversed a labyrinth of deceit, secrets and fear. But now the path clears. It is time to uncover the truth." He moved forward, producing from his coat pocket the torn page from the book on Norman land transfers. This page was removed to hide evidence of a new clause in Lord Henry's will, Poirot explained. One that would have left the estate to Clara Vale, much to the dismay of certain members of this household. Hugo shifted uneasily. Poirot turned to him. "Monsieur Montclair, you denied her claim vehemently, but your anger was not only for the money, it was for the threat to your family's name." Hugo's eyes flashed. "It was nonsense. Clara's claim was fabricated." "Ah, but the letter from Laurent Girard suggests otherwise." Poirot held up the folded letter. Laurent was involved in business dealings with Lord Henry, but also knew secrets that could ruin reputations. Lady Eugenia's face paled. "Laurent was blackmailing me, threatening to reveal Isabel's true parentage." Poirot nodded. "A secret you wish to keep, madame, but here lies the twist." He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle. "The murder of Lord Henry was not to protect your secret alone. It was also to prevent the will's change and to protect one particular person's inheritance." Poirot stepped closer to Clara Vale. "Miss Vale, you have been accused by many, but your actions have always seemed above reproach. Is this true?" Clara's lips tightened. "I have nothing to hide." Poirot's gaze then turned to Dr. Ramsden. "Doctor, you have been present throughout these events, watching, listening, perhaps judging." Ramsden's calm facade flickered for a moment. Poirot continued. "You were the last person known to see Lord Henry alive before his death." The doctor's eyes narrowed slightly. "Indeed," Poirot said, "you admitted to being in your room at the time, but your alibi is weak. No one can confirm it." Dr. Ramsden said quietly, "I was reading. Alone." Poirot shook his head gently. "A convenient lie." The room stiffened. "But the true motive runs deeper than simple greed." Poirot turned to Hugo. "Your resentment at losing your inheritance, your anger at the presence of Clara Vale, these were known. But you did not act." Hugo's face hardened. "And Lady Eugenia?" Poirot said softly. "You feared Laurent Girard's threats, but you did not kill your husband." Lady Eugenia's composure remained, but her voice was barely above a whisper. "Then who?" Poirot smiled, a sparkle in his eyes. "The truth, mes amis, is that the murderer was the one who stood to gain the most from Lord Henry's death. Isabel." A gasp rose from the group. Isabel's face remained calm. "You're mistaken." Poirot raised a hand for silence. "Please, hear me out." He gestured to the letter fragments. "Laurent Girard's threats were to you, Isabel, as well as Lady Eugenia. You feared your secret would ruin your place here, the only home you had ever known." Poirot's eyes softened. "Yet you loved Lord Henry as a father. But when you discovered the planned will change, the one that would have disinherited you completely, desperation took hold." Isabel's voice trembled slightly. "I did not kill him." "Ah, but your fingerprints were on the letter found at the scene, You confronted your father in the orchard, demanding to know why he would betray you. Isabel's eyes widened. No! Poirot held up the torn book page. The page was removed to hide evidence that you had been named in the will, a fact your mother tried to keep secret. Poirot turned to the group. Isabel confronted Lord Henry that night. An argument ensued. In a moment of passion and fear, she struck him. The blow was fatal. Isabel's breath caught. Poirot added gently, "Afterwards, in panic, you tried to cover your tracks, burning letters, removing evidence." She shook her head, tears in her eyes. "It was an accident." Poirot inclined his head. "An accident born of fear and love, but justice requires truth." The room was silent, the weight of the revelation sinking deep. Poirot then addressed Lady Eugenia. "You chose to protect Isabel's secret, even at great personal risk." Lady Eugenia nodded slowly. "She is my daughter, and I will do anything to keep her safe." "And Hugo?" Poirot asked. "You fought against the changes, but found no cause to act violently." Hugo's shoulders slumped. "I was angry, yes, but not enough to kill." Poirot smiled faintly. "Indeed, monsieur. Your anger was a red herring." Finally, Poirot turned to Clara Vale. "You stood to inherit everything, yet you did nothing to hasten Lord Henry's death." Clara looked relieved. "Because I respected him. He was my benefactor." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Ah, loyalty, a rare and beautiful thing," he concluded. "The murder was tragic, but the consequences of truth have now begun to heal old wounds." Isabel, her tears drying, spoke quietly. "I want to make amends." "And you shall," Poirot said kindly. "The law will take its course, but your courage to face the truth is the first step." The household exhaled collectively, some in relief, others in sorrow. Poirot's gaze swept the room once more. "Mes mysteries like these reveal not only the darkest corners of the heart, but also its capacity for redemption." He clasped his hands, "And with that I shall take my leave of Weatherly Grange." As he walked down the drive towards the waiting carriage, Poirot paused briefly, looking back at the grand house now shrouded in morning mist. "In every soul," he murmured, "there lies a shadow and a light. The balance of those, mes amis, is what I seek." With that, he turned, ready for his next adventure, his little grey cells ever vigilant.